Every day you and I get bombarded with negative news. Just like the body becomes what we eat, the mind becomes what we're putting in. It is important to listen to stories that not only gives you hope, but also inspires you and uplifts you. In this podcast, we're interviewing experts who will break down the solutions to the world's most pressing problems. And I promise you, if you listen to this podcast, you will not only stay informed, but you will also feel more energy in your life. Welcome to Great.com Talks with. Hey, if you want to contribute to protecting planet Earth, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, because Great.com is donating 100% of profit to funding the most effective cause areas to help planet Earth, like protecting the rainforest or funding climate change technology. And the topic of today is, how do we reach the 17 Global Sustainable Development Goal, the SDGs? How to reach the 17 Global Sustainable Development Goal that was created back in 2015 by the United Nations, that kind of works like a blueprint to how do we create a better future for life. And to understand more about that, we have invited our guest today, who is John Colmy. So John, you work at Global Landscapes Forum. Could you, I want to say welcome before I start asking some questions. Hi, welcome, John.
Thank you so much for having me today.
John, we're going to talk about Global Landscapes Forum, what you do. But before we go into that, I would like to understand a little bit more about the actual problem that you're trying to solve. Could you identify the problem? Is that possible?
Yes, I would say I'm happy to, but it's not a pleasing discussion. If you're a religious person, we're facing an environmental collapse of biblical proportions. There's fires in California, Siberia, Brazil, Indonesia a few years ago. There's hurricanes and typhoons in the Philippines. There's floods. There's a pandemic. We're living through the sixth mass extinction. Over 1 million species, according to scientists, could be gone in a decade or two. The temperature is rising so fast that scientists say the Arctic could be ice-free at the end of the summer within a few years of this decade. 27% of the Amazon could be gone by 2030. The tipping point for an irreversible environmental disaster is 25%. There's land degradation. There's global inequality, and it's made worse by the COVID, much worse. There's political unrest, and migration that will happen next. We're seeing it in Peru, and we're seeing it in around the world, in Ethiopia. And political scientists are expecting more of it. The problem is it's all connected. We have to look at the world as one landscape. We can no longer talk about global south and global north and east and west. There's one world, one planet, and we're all connected. That is the challenge we're facing.
You're saying if there's a wildfire in Australia, that is affecting America, Europe, Asia, every place on Earth.
Absolutely. If you look at the three great forests in Amazon, Central Africa, and Southeast Asia, what happens there affects the areas above it and around the world. The fires in Indonesia were so bad in 2015, it created a major climate event. It will always affect it. There's been research shown that the drought in Brazil caused Hurricane Katrina. It is all connected. Absolutely.
So now it's more a matter of will, I guess, where we would need people to agree upon that the world is in a really bad shape, and then our leaders to set the tone.
Well, that's the good news. The good news, and we have a chance now. It's not over yet. The magic number is 2030, and that's why the SDGs you talked about are set for 2030. But if you look at COVID, you can see both one side of the problem and one side of the answer. One side of the problem is how many lives would have been saved if the leaders would have all worked together, including America, which is even now is causing problems for the whole world because people move and people migrate and they travel. But what if they had all worked together? What would have been the answer? It showed us, as Otto Scharmer from MIT said recently, we can focus on one problem at the same time, and we have, and we are now. And we're about to have the virus, the vaccine, and we're going to move that around the world, and hopefully in a intelligent, strategic way. But we can focus on a problem. We can focus on the environment. If we look at it holistically, it is one problem and it's all connected.
The reason why I chose the topic here, the SDGs, is Global Landscapes Forum, if I understand correctly. You are dedicated into implementing those 17 goals. And if we now look at those 17 goals as a blueprint or like directions, how would you want people to look at those 17 goals?
It's going to be my message throughout, and it's all connected. SDGs were very important, but you can't look at any one of them, and that's been the problem. We've all been working in silos: agriculture, water, forest. So forest, we're trying to protect the forest, but agriculture is plowing it down. 70% of deforestation, higher in the Amazon. You can't look at agriculture, can't look at food security separate from gender or community or indigenous rights. The SDGs are all connected. And GLF, the Global Landscape Forum, is SDG 17. Trying to have a global conversation, we're trying to create a global movement of 1 billion people that will move in one direction. And our objective is to contribute to achieving the SDGs and the Paris Climate Agreement, because climate's not separate either. We all have to look at these together. If you just look at forests in 15, SDG 15, it won't get us anywhere because we've been doing that for 50 years and deforestation has taken off, as still we can't turn it around the way we'd like to.
So you're saying we can't look at them separately. It's more, how do we align everybody to move in the same direction? And where would you say that we are right now? We just had a big change in leadership from America, which is going to affect, of course, how people are, which direction people are moving. Where would you say that the world is right now in that? Are people about to go towards the direction that we need to go, or are we still too shattered?
Well, I mean, if you look at the science, you look at where we are right now environmentally, we have to reduce carbon emissions by 40% to achieve the 2-degree limit, pre-industrial rise in temperature. We're not on track to be anywhere near that right now. Although COVID has helped. If you look at, and it's not emotional, look at Swiss Re, look at the big insurance companies. You know, in 2018, it was their most expensive year. They don't get emotional about this. They just look at what they're facing in terms of risk. $225 billion. Now it's even more this year. I think the world's in shock because of COVID, but we have to answer that shock and we have to respond to that. We have time, 2030, if we all work together, if we move in a solid direction. The good news is we know what to do. And I don't mean just people in MIT, people in DRC. There are scientists. The great thing about the internet and education's improved all over the world. That's one thing we've done. And with GLF, we're not giving northern answers to southern problems. We believe there's one problem and we need southern and northern answers to that problem. We can do it, but we are in shock. The election in America, if we see America move in a positive direction, rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement, and provide leadership along with Europe and along with Asia, we can turn this around. There's no question about it. It's not unachievable.
I want to kind of ask some questions specific related to the organization that you're working for, Global Landscapes Forum, to help myself and the people listening to get some kind of idea. What is it that you are doing on a daily basis? What could be a specific project that you guys are working on?
Well, I think the Global Landscape Forum was never intended, we never thought it would become as large as it is today. In 2013, and maybe a little bit before that, there was awareness around our charter members, the World Bank, UNEP, the scientists we're working with, scientists in forestry, agriculture, water, WWF, all the major organizations, Conservation International. We realized in 210, 213, that we were doing something wrong. Look at but we failed on the Aceh targets of biodiversity. Climate was going, we were facing a climate cliff. Every inequality was rising. What had we achieved in development? There was something wrong. And that wrong was we needed to look at it holistically. Now, what we did was, this was in 2013, and what we did was we took an ecological concept, a science concept called the landscape approach, which looks at any landscape, whether it's a farm or the Andes Mountains, and we negotiate with stakeholders to get multiple benefits: more productive, more prosperous, more equitable, and more resilient. That's our goal: create landscapes. We had 1,300 people showed up in Warsaw at the university there, alongside the COP. Today, we've reached something like 800 million people. It just grew and grew and grew, and with funding from the German government, who said, let's scale this up. The other thing is digital. COVID has so many sadness, so many issues about it, and you can't underestimate how bad it's been for people. But it did do one thing: it opened up digital for us. We have been catapulted into the digital future, into a digital age. I don't care what we had before, this is it. Two conferences we had this year had 5,000 people attending and reached 50 million people on social media. And it was people from 185 countries. We can have a global conference now. We can have a global conversation. We can have living knowledge where we pass on and accelerate uptake what is working around the world on any issue. And that's what GLF is about. Now, we're also working, I could talk a little bit more, but basically the landscape approach. We look at food and livelihoods. We need finance. We need banks to come in and start doing impact investing on a global level. Communities and rights. We talk about gender. We talk about indigenous rights. We talk about tenure rights, which are weak all over in many, many countries, and particularly in forest. Restoration. We have to restore the degraded areas, and biodiversity and climate. These are the issues that we look at all at once, never one by one, but we will tackle them one by one and then look at it cross-cutting. This is what we're trying to do. We have 8,000 organizations involved. We are knowledge-led. That means local knowledge and science knowledge. So anyone, thousands of scientists are involved with GLF, leading scientists on every subject, and from their local communities. So knowledge-led and local-led, and one other thing, very, very important, community-led. We can't go down and solve any community. We can't go to the next door neighbor and solve their problem, or the next country. It has to be solved. The Amazon has to be solved by people in the Amazon, the issues they're facing. We can't impose issues. It's got to be community-led, and that's what we're all about.
Let's see if I can summarize a little bit of what you said there. Global Landscape Forum was never intended to grow as much as it has grown. Now it's about 200. It's people from 185 countries.
We have 220,000 people who have gone to our conferences in one way or the other. We have 50,000 youth from 80 countries. We have 7,000 journalists covering us. We've had 8,000 organizations, and we've reached 800 million people on traditional media and regular media.
I guess then that would be also a way of being like an authority in helping people to direct focus. So I guess if I understood it correctly, the organizations behind Global Landscapes Forum is Center for International Forestry Research, United Nations, World Bank, and charter members. So there's kind of multiple organizations who are collaborating. Is that how we could view the Global Landscape Forum?
Yes, Global Landscape Forum is not me or any one of us, but it is collaborative leadership and collaborative and collective knowledge. So all the charter members bring something different. So let's say we take an issue like peatlands. No one thinks about peatlands, but they're a huge carbon source. And right now, about 85% of them are still in the ground. If they're released, if they're developed, we will never hit any climate target anywhere. You put a fork into peatlands and they start emitting carbon. We had a conference in Indonesia on peatlands, and every different charter member brought a different skill or a different expertise. And then we worked with local scientists at the Ministry of Forestry there and others to try to solve it. We came up with policies to work on developing or protecting. And that's another rule, is we have to conserve what we have and sustainably use what's left. We can't afford to use our resources that we have left in a natural state. So we try to bring collective knowledge together. C4, Center for International Forestry Research, we're one of the leading centers in the world on forests. We've been working in 50 forests or 50 countries around the world for 25, 30 years. Agroforestry is our merger, ECRAF. They look at agroforestry, trees on forests. Water, ILRI is another charter member. They look at livestock. And livestock in Ethiopia, but also livestock in Montana. It's all the same. And we're learning from livestock how they're doing. They actually do organic farming and livestock in Montana. They do great things there. We can, so it's collective knowledge and collaborative leadership.
It makes it clearer. It's still a little bit abstract for me personally to understand, but I guess what really is the point here that you're trying to make is we're all together and we need to solve it on local level anyway. So it's the to see the problem with climate change and inequalities and poverty as coming from one source.
We have to keep it simple, and that's what we try to do. We are trying to create global landscapes, and ultimately one landscape that is productive. That means we have to have food. It has to be productive. Fisheries have to be productive. We can't just take livelihoods away. Prosperous, smallholders, fishermen, they need to have an income. Equitable. This is critical. And this is where we failed so much, so seriously. And then resilient. It must be resilient. We can't get a harvest for 1 year. We have to get it for 10. It's a really simple idea. We want a movement. We felt we had to change the narrative. We've done that. Most of the research scientists in the world, most of the development agencies, the World Bank and others, governments talk about landscapes, forest landscapes, farm landscapes, ocean landscapes. We've done that. We've succeeded. 800 million people have heard our message. We're now at an inflection point where we have to get to action on the ground. And I can talk a little bit about what we're going to do there. Because one day, if we're successful, people will forget Global Landscape Forum. Just like the green movement. It'll be a movement, and people will just do it naturally. And I'll be very, very happy if we disappear in 10 years.
What would you want? We're going towards the end here. What would you want people to do after hearing this interview?
Well, there's several things to do. One is we have just launched, and that's why I say the inflection point. We have a landscape academy where you can learn these in more detailed subjects, learn more about this. But we've also just launched something called GLFX. We're going to set up chapters of Global Landscape Forum around the world. In Brazil, we've just launched 6 of them. One is in Malawi, one is in the Philippines, and they will be community-led. They will be led by local communities, and they will carry out research or restoration projects on the ground, different kinds of activities, beach cleaning. They will decide what the problems are, and they will solve them. And the collective knowledge of the charter members and the scientists will all be there to help them, and will help them raise money. But they are led, they're in charge. So we are going to decentralize GLF. Currently, we have a secretariat in Bonn, and we're going to be sharing knowledge around the world. What you could do is you could start a chapter wherever you are. We have them in Europe as well. You can join our mailing list and learn about our events. You can join an event and talk to people you've never talked to before that think just like you. I've always said that an Ethiopian farmer and a Montana farmer or an Iowa farmer have the same issues. And what if they could have a conversation together? And it's just scale is different. So join one of our conferences, join the mailing list, just get involved. And we're not trying to make money, and we're trying to change the world. And it depends on all of us. Everyone can contribute from the local level to your local community.
Thank you. You could start a chapter, contribute by going to your local community. You're not trying to make money, you're trying to change the world. And one day, if you would disappear from 10 years from now, that will make you happy. That's what I take with me. The last question I have is, if you would summarize, what is it that you want people to really understand when they leave this interview?
It's all connected. There's one world. We're all facing the same issues. We're all facing the same crisis. We're all facing the pandemic right now. We're all facing different issues of income and jobs and climate change and fires and extreme weather. We're all facing these issues together in different ways in our local community, but it's all connected. And we can solve these problems if we look at it that way. And we look and act, look at these issues and act holistically. Look at them and holistically and act holistically. We can get out of this. I'm absolutely convinced of it.